Welcome to 502 Conversations. I'm Brian Kerby, and my guest today is Nick Little, who is the legal department for Center for Inquiry. Thank you very much for being here, Nick. We have quite an interesting topic to discuss, and I appreciate your being here.
Well, thanks for having me today, Brian.
You're welcome. And I am going to read your bio because it's impressive. Is that all right?
Absolutely.
If you feel like blushing, go ahead. If I get something wrong, though, please correct me.
Will do.
All right. And it is quite extensive, so I want to, and I'm actually reading it and covering it because it's important that people know your background, your education, and your level of expertise, which is something that isn't always taken seriously nowadays.
Thank you.
Nick Little is the legal director of the Center for Inquiry and the entire legal department based out of Washington, D.C. He was educated at Oxford University and the University of Warwick in the UK. He moved to the US and earned a law degree from Vanderbilt. He then joined the law firm of Howery LLP and litigated national and international antitrust matters, as well as a series of pro bono engagements. He successfully represented an apostate from the Middle East who faced deportation to and then execution in his native Sudan for the crime of converting away from Islam. And you earned him or won him asylum here in the US. And that, again, execution for the crime of converting from Islam. He's also worked with mentally ill New Yorkers to ensure adequate provisions of state resources, enabling patients to leave institutions and safely and productively live in the community. He's represented hearing disabled citizens in their efforts to ensure local hospitals provided sign language interpreters as required by the American with Disabilities Act. And he has represented individuals in complaints of malpractice against the D.C. Metropolitan Police. When his firm closed, Nick moved to the nonprofit sector and accepted a position with CFI, and as such has filed amicus briefs in the Hobby Lobby Supreme Court case and in the Seventh Circuit challenge to challenge unfair tax breaks given to housing allowances paid to religious ministers. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. Now, to the heart of our subject today. Earlier this year, he filed a consumer protection lawsuit in the D.C. Superior Court against CVS for fraud, as CVS displays homeopathic products alongside science-based medicine in their stores and online, and you hope to ensure through this legal action that consumers are protected from sham products masquerading as medical treatments. I have a quote here I want to read to you.
Sure.
If you know where I pulled this quote, don't tip it off. We'll get to it later. This is a quote. Despite its widespread use in some countries, virtually no scientific authority takes homeopathy seriously. There are several reasons for this intense skepticism, but the most important focuses on a basic fact of chemistry. Do you know where I got that? Don't tell me, but...
I think I may do.
Okay, we'll come back to it. We'll come back, because it's actually kind of important.
Mm-hmm.
So before we get to specifics, what's the germ of this suit, and where did the idea come from, and when did you or CFI say, enough is enough, this is probably a good case to take on?
One of the first conversations I had when I joined CFI...
How long ago?
Which was 5 years and 3 months ago. 5 years and 2 months ago. Was with then the CEO and president, Ron Lindsay, who was my boss at the time. And I remember sitting in his office and we were like, we need to sue a retailer over homeopathy. Because the trouble is, I mean, everyone knows that homeopathy is nonsense, or everyone in the skeptic community knows homeopathy is complete nonsense. The trouble is the availability of drugs in the United States is federally controlled, and it's controlled through the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA. The Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, also has a role in determining what needs to be put on the labels of drugs. But it's these two federal agencies are very much in charge, and the laws setting this up date back to the 1930s, I believe, back to the Roosevelt administration, when the Food and Drug Act, the Federal Food and Drug Act was passed. And this carved out homeopathy because of the wishes of one senator. So this idea of senators, you know, inserting their personal preferences into legislation is not new. This was back in New Deal times. And I believe, though don't quote me on this, that the senator was from Utah. and was a homeopath himself. So and we're talking here about over-the-counter drugs, drugs that you don't need a prescription to get. So if we look at acetaminophen, for example, the active ingredient in Tylenol, one of the most widely used drugs in the country. If a company is putting out a new product with acetaminophen in it, it doesn't have to go back to the initial basics of testing because the FDA has done all the testing on acetaminophen. When it comes to homeopathic remedies, treatments, and I shouldn't use the term remedy because they don't remedy anything, it's arguable they don't treat anything. Homeopathic products.
Okay.
They have a rule that they don't need to go through the same testing. They don't need to show efficacy at all. If they are listed in the homeopathic, the big bumper book of homeopathy, it's called the HPUC, I believe. So which goes back and it lists all these different indications for homeopathic products. So basically, you can just put them on shelves and you are restricted in what you can say about them. Like, you can't say they cure a specific disease. You're not meant to be able to say they cure a specific disease unless you have evidence that they cure that disease. And of course, you don't have evidence that it cures that disease because they don't. So we have worked with the FDA and the FTC. We have given testimony. We've submitted comments. We've asked them to enforce their rules, which we believe the homeopaths are breaking.
Can I pause you just for 1 second there? Because it's a conversation, so I want to interrupt occasionally to clarify two things before you go too far. FDA, safety and efficacy. FTC, labeling and also advertisements. I was going to say advertisements and media.
Yes.
Correct. Now, when you say that they can't make any claims, it says homeopathic cold remedy. That's a claim, isn't it?
That is a claim.
And if you see that head-on stuff, cure your headache, that's a claim.
That's a claim.
So how's that not a claim? Okay. So now I guess we're actually where I stopped you.
Yeah. I wish I could tell you. I mean, I wish there was a reason that the FDA and the FTC wasn't, why they aren't doing their job on this. There is some stuff which I obviously don't have from any official source, but it makes sense to me. And I also found this out from the D.C. consumer protection people as well. The D.C. consumer protection people told me they wouldn't go after CVS because they're concerned about somebody selling a cure for cancer to D.C. residents, which is some ground-up dust from Mexico, for example. And so they have things at a much higher level of the harm that they see that they're dealing with first.
So they're willing to give a pass to a $10 pill because they're going after hundreds of thousands of dollars in fraud in the camp.
Where that's people are being told, walk away from chemotherapy and here, this will cure you. And of course, the people who take this then die of cancer. Did
you happen to mention that, okay, there are a few people that spend $100,000, but the cumulative effect of millions of people buying $10 products is actually more? And I'm not a lawyer, I'm not...
No, and the FDA put out a new standard for what they're going to do in this, to do with homeopathy. And they said they were going to focus on serious diseases, impurities in the product, and vulnerable populations such as the elderly, children. Things on that. I spoke to some of their lawyers on this, and we were basically told there is no appetite in Washington, D.C. for increased regulation under the current administration. So we were essentially told it's not going to work. So we started looking at the states instead, at the individual states instead. And the trouble with filing a lawsuit generally, and to get a little bit legalistic on this, is the concept of standing. In order to bring a lawsuit, you have to show that you, the plaintiff, were harmed in some way. The trouble with that on homeopathy is the question of where is this harm? And there clearly is harm. You know, if you buy a packet of acylcoccinum to treat your flu, you pay $18
Wow.
for powder. For lactose is, I assume, the inert ingredient. Because there is this product, which is advertised as treating flu-like symptoms, is a 10 to the power, it's a 200 CK, which is a homeopathic notation, dilution of a Latin phrase, Annus barbari. Annus barbari refers to the heart and liver of a particular type of duck, the Muscovy duck. A 200 C dilution means that 1 part of this duck liver is placed into 100 parts of water. And that is a 1 dilution of this. That is then done 200 times.
Right.
So in other words, there is 1 part duck liver and heart, supposedly in the final solution, for every 10 to the 400 parts of water. Nobody can look at the number 10 to the 400 and have any sense of what it is. But the example I always use in this is that it is currently believed that there are 10 to the power of 72 atoms in the known universe. So this is a number equivalent to the atoms in, I believe, 430 times the atoms in the known universe.
It's a nonsensical number.
There is nothing but the inert base in this product. So where's the harm? If you walk in and you take this off the shelf when you've got the flu and it does nothing, the harm is, there's 3 potential harms that we brought out here. The first of these is you've just spent $20 on garbage. You might as well have spent it on visiting a shaman to, you know, shake a rattle over your head. So you've been ripped off for $20. And you're right, as you said earlier, Brian, that this is happening to a lot of different people. But there's a second harm in that you've walked down that aisle and you haven't bought the Tylenol flu remedy that wouldn't have necessarily cured your flu, but would have made you more comfortable and would have shortened the duration of your flu. So not only are you out $20, you're also suffering from the flu longer than you would have to suffer for it if you took real medicine. And the third harm is these products aren't regulated properly. You may be well be taking something that isn't even the fantastically small dilution of duck liver. And in most cases, this isn't a problem. But then recently there were Highlands, which is a homeopathic company. The FDA recalled all of their teething products. These are products to be given to babies that the alleged active ingredient is deadly nightshade. And they were putting 50 to 100 to 200 times the listed dose on there. And children taking this product, and it's never been officially said that taking the product did this, but children who took that product suffered major side effects, and some of the children died.
That was an odd case, or that was an odd happening, because homeopathic remedies are supposed to be, or not remedies, homeopathic products are supposed to be diluted beyond plausibility. So how it caused harm is an interesting problem. They just messed it up or didn't care, or...
You know, and obviously for legal reasons,
okay.
I'm loath to sit here and speculate, but the product was tainted. The product was not what it said on the package. Now, what it said on the package would not have cured a kid's teething troubles, but it also shouldn't have killed a kid.
Let me ask you a question. So FDA, first was safety, because there was that famous, I don't know if it was glycol or ethylene glycol got mixed in with some kind of children's remedy, and hundreds of people died, or
I
at
believe
least 100.
so.
Okay,
yes.
So that was maybe in the 20s or 30s. The FDA, first it was to prove safety, and then efficacy wasn't until the 60s, right?
Efficacy was later, yes.
So safety and effective, it's all FDA now. That product was not safe, and why didn't they immediately jump in? You're saying because that is their job, right?
That is their
job. Now
job.
that people have been harmed.
And they did.
Okay.
They did act on it in the end. It was withdrawn from the shelves. We were sat back with not an I told you so type moment, but a why haven't you been listening to us on this? When you see, and I know it's the popular thing in the world is to attack Big Pharma, and Big Pharma is out to get us, and whatever people want to say. In the United States in particular, the level of attention to detail and the testing and the safety standards that every medical product has to meet are astonishingly high. And then you get alternative medical products that just don't meet those standards, that don't have not only do they not have the efficacy, they also don't have the basic product safety that we have come to expect from, that we all think nothing of, opening up the bottle of Advil in the morning and popping them. Remember when there was the whole Tylenol was interfered with and everything got safety seals? I can't remember exactly, but that was 2 or 3 people ended up dying from that, which is a terrible crime.
And it was a crime in that case.
And it
wasn't an issue of negligence, it was a crime.
It was a crime. And the entire country was up in arms about let's make these products safer. And that's great. But yet we spend billions of dollars a year on these homeopathic products, on these alternative medicine products, and we don't even look at how safe they are. So we were back, and those were the 3 harms. And I'm sorry, I was talking about how we came to bring the lawsuit. It's very difficult to find somebody to stand up and say, I've been harmed by homeopathy. Because for most people, that harm's going to be, I spent $20 on something and it didn't work. And also, if it's a condition like a sore throat or an earache or the flu, those conditions get better. You were going to get better anyway, so you may not even know. And so we were finding it very hard to find a plaintiff, somebody to stand up and say, I've been harmed by this. DC's consumer protection standards are very high, and you have what they call an enforceable right to truthful information about the products you buy. If you go to buy a car and they tell you this gets you 400 miles to the gallon, and it actually gets you 30 miles to the gallon, that breaks DC's consumer protection laws. But there's also something in that law, which a lot of other states don't have, that allows non-profit organizations, such as the Center for Inquiry, to act as a private attorney general. So we don't have to sue on our own behalf. We can say there is harm being done to the general public. We are suing on behalf of the general public, which we have filed the lawsuit on behalf of the entire population of the District of Columbia for both homeopathic sales in bricks and mortar stores within the District of Columbia and online sales from CVS to DC residents.
And part of this is, now that you've got that part through, you're alleging fraud, right? It's fraud. Now, fraud is intentional deception. Is that... you have to prove intentional deception. So you have to prove that what do you have to prove? That it's... So you're suing CVS, not the manufacturer.
We're suing CVS.
So you have to prove... I don't know if this is true. I'm just saying things. I'm not a lawyer. So fraud is intentional deception. You have to prove that CVS knows that they're not efficacious and they're putting it on there, saying it is? So what basically the lawsuit also is, they're putting it right next to real medicine.
Absolutely.
So that's part of the deception,
yeah.
you're saying.
I mean, the lawsuit in a nutshell is that you walk into CVS and it's organized in aisles. And there will be an aisle that says cold and flu. And on that aisle, there will be Tylenol, cold and flu, decongestants, all these science-based medicine. And then right in the middle of that, there's a box of this acylcoccinum, which is the duck liver nonsense. Our argument is that by displaying it under a sign saying cold and flu next to things which cure or treat cold and flu, you are saying to customers, this treats cold and flu. If you go to the website and you type into the search bar flu remedy, on the first page of results there are homeopathic products. I think it's pretty straightforward to say that CVS website is claiming those homeopathic products are flu remedies, because that's what you search for. What do we need to show is what you were asking.
Yeah, intentional deception. And let me back up just a second. I'll play devil's advocate. I'll go back and forth here, okay? Great point you just made. I'll give you that point. I'm being kind of a jerk here, but I'm just going to, just for ease of...
Not a problem.
Being a jerk's easy. Great point there. Great point, Attorney Nick Little. But, we deceive ourselves all the time. When I see an ad that says no money down, no upfront cost, and I think, oh gosh, what a great deal. I don't read the fine print. I've actually deceived myself because the information is there. If I go into CVS and I see the homeopathic product next to the real medicine, I can pick up the homeopathic product and read the label. I can, if I'm not familiar with it, I can look it up online. I've deceived myself by not being a good consumer. Not their problem, my problem.
Absolutely, and that very much is the argument that the retailers
So we're not frauding
you,
you're defrauding yourself.
Right. You use the example of zero money down. And yes, there's fine print. But if you get in there and they then say, after you've gone through the whole process, it's $100 down.
Yeah, I realize that was a bad example.
There's been fraud. No, and I think that's very similar to what CVS are doing on this. In that they are using, CVS prides itself in being a part of your healthcare decisions. Their entire advertising strategy, their entire corporate structure is set up saying, trust us. Trust us. We are part of this. We know because, let's face it, we all know that the American healthcare system is a shambles for a lot of people. We know that when you have the sniffles, you're not going to your doctor.
Right.
You're going to the CVS stores. Trust us. We will take care of you.
So wait, so this is like you see it on the shelf, it says cures the cold. Then when you get to the checkout, if the person says this does not cure a cold, that would be the equivalent of asking for $100 down?
That actually, if CVS was doing that, I'd be a lot happier with them.
Okay.
If they were saying
but
that,
it's kind of like
they're not. And it's also like a cashier is not necessarily the person who should be saying this. Which, although I've taken medical advice from very strange people on this.
Yeah, right.
What they are doing is they are using the reputation of the real medicine, of the science-based medicine, and letting that cloak the fake medicine, the homeopathic nonsense, with the same aura of respectability. I think it is very hard for CVS to maintain that when they put something under a sign that says cold and flu, they are not claiming to the customer that this treats cold and flu. In the same way, if they had a refrigerator in there that said zero-calorie drinks, and there was they put regular Coke in there as well as the Diet Coke, that would be, even though you can pick up the can of Coke, even though you can read it in that, they are deliberately creating the impression that the can of regular Coke is the same as the can of Diet Coke in that, to the extent that it's 0 calorie. And you just can't do that to consumers. We accept that individuals have a responsibility to educate themselves, to be educated in what they buy.
And we is?
I'm saying as CFI on this.
I thought so, not just we.
And that's our job in CFI is to, we're an educational non-profit, and one of our missions is to educate people that homeopathy, that Reiki healing, that crystals are nonsense, and you need to go to a real doctor and get real treatment. On the other hand, the manufacturers have a responsibility to put out safe, effective products and to tell people what the products are. But also the retailer has a responsibility in how they market things. And that's a responsibility that the DC law recognizes, which is the basis of this lawsuit.
And that responsibility has been tested and tried several times, that this is a responsibility of the retailer on a variety of different things, right? It's not new territory.
No, I mean, it's, to the best of my knowledge, it's the first time it's been done this way for homeopathy. But yeah,
but they're analogical.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the way I found out that we could sue as a private attorney general, as the non-profit suing on behalf of the general public, was a case called Bimbo Bakeries, which was in D.C. that a consumer protection organization sued a baker for claiming their bread was whole grain when it was disputing the amount of whole grain that was actually in the product. And they actually turned out to lose the lawsuit on this. But that's where this was established, that non-profits could represent the general public in the District of Columbia on it. So, yeah, I mean, it's not a new argument that retailers have a responsibility not to deliberately mislead customers.
Well, the Bimbo Bakery thing sounds like that Seinfeld low-fat yogurt problem.
Absolutely.
All right, let me be the jerk again. It's a role I play well. My friends will tell you. I'm, okay, CFI attorney Nick Little. I'm hotshot CVS attorney. I've got 100,000 people I'm going to bring in that are going to say they took yakety-yak homeopathic remedy and they felt better a week later or a month later. You know, it's going to take 2 years to get these people to the courtroom. Mm-hmm. And they're going to testify. They feel better after they take homeopathic products. What are you going to do? You ready to drop it?
Am I ready to drop it? No. And that's actually very interesting on this, because when there have been a whole series of lawsuits against homeopathic manufacturers before on this, but they've tended to be class action lawsuits and on behalf of named consumers on this. And those go away if you throw enough money at them, because there's no motivation behind it for the public interest.
Okay. Uh-huh.
It's like if you make if Boiron, who makes oscillococcinum, offer $50 to everybody who has a receipt saying they've ever bought this product, and then $2 million legal fees to the law firm, everyone walks away happy. Not in this situation, because we're, as an organization, I'm not going to say we wouldn't love legal fees, but that's not why we're suing. We're not suing for damages. We're suing to say, stop this practice. So
actually, you've just answered all my questions, because you were saying, what's the harm? You just plop down $20. I was going to ask, well, why don't you get 100,000 people and file a class action lawsuit? But then it's all about money and not principle.
It's all about money.
Okay, you really answered that quite well.
And there's nothing there's no change at the end of that.
Right.
Because
and you have to keep your mouth shut.
Absolutely. Which, I'm British and I'm a lawyer. I'm really not good at keeping my mouth shut. It's so what would we do with all these people? Essentially, they wouldn't be allowed to testify, because that's not relevant information. Number one, these people
You say that, but judges are not the...
A judge would agree with me on that.
Okay. They do allow anecdotal evidence in sometimes, though, right?
They do. And the first thing is, in cross-examination, it's, so you took a product and your cold got better after 2 weeks. Well, when you didn't take a particular product, how long did it take your cold to get better from? If CVS, the potential...
Before you go on too far, though,
Sure.
Just explain something about a case like this that I have no knowledge of, because I have no knowledge how it works once you get inside a courtroom. If this were a jury case, they will sympathize with the anecdotal evidence, because so if you're doing this in front of 12 people and the person says, I got better 2 weeks after, they'll go, oh, yeah, yeah. And then when you say, wouldn't it have gotten better, they're not necessarily going to go, oh, that's true, too. Right. So is this like a jury thing? Is this a six-panel judge thing?
We requested a jury trial.
You did?
None of that is set in stone on it. It's... There are definite pros and cons to a jury trial, as there always are. On the one hand, you're right. Our case is a scientific one. Our case is that this is snake oil nonsense. And there's potential that you get somebody on the jury who is a dedicated user of homeopathic products. Now, you try and sort that out in voir dire beforehand. But you don't know. On the other hand, why do you want juries? You're going up against the 9th biggest corporation in the United States.
Well,
and when you go up, juries like the consumer.
You mentioned something interesting about the jury, though. I almost served on a jury, and one of the things that came up in the little pep talk beforehand is you're not allowed to bring in any outside influences.
Mm-hmm.
All right, you have to look at the evidence. And so to me, it sounded like I wasn't allowed to think beyond the evidence. And so when it's a scientific case, it's almost if I'm on that jury in the 12 room, I wouldn't be allowed to say anything that's not part of the case. Like, I wouldn't be able to say, you know how homeopathy works.
And that's why it's the responsibility of the lawyer to make sure, and if this case was before a jury, I would be laying out what homeopathy was.
So it becomes part of the evidence.
Yeah.
And then they can talk about it.
And then they can talk about it. Scientific cases of, and I've done these before. I was involved in a jury trial about the cover of golf balls and trying to explain the plasma process to a jury. Fortunately, it wasn't me having to try to do that, but those can get complicated. It is, I mean, it's very similar to what they say about democracy. The jury system is the worst possible way of determining a lawsuit, except for every other way that anybody has ever thought of.
If you got a chemist on the jury, would they be allowed to give a little I'm kind of getting a little bit off track. So you can bring in your own expertise if you just happen to be.
And yes, and on that, I mean, where a trial would get interesting is on expert witnesses on this. You know, sort of like we would certainly be looking to have experts stand up and explain what homeopathy is, why it's utter nonsense, why it's just it's a physical impossibility that this can do anything. They presumably would bring in an expert witness trying to rehabilitate.
What's an expert homeopathy witness, by the way?
Then we would then get into the whole.
What makes an expert?
It's a part of law referred to as a Daubert motion, which is the motion to exclude somebody's expert witness because they're not really an expert. And so we would be going back and forth on that. The case could get very, very complicated.
Oh yeah, you could find an anti-vaccination medical doctor. And not you specifically, but you can.
I guarantee that in some of the vaccine cases that have been brought.
Sorry,
yes.
Was that? Let's see about that slip.
That's very Freudian on that. In some of those cases, there will have been people designated as expert witnesses who would have stood up there and said vaccines cause autism.
And so you might get a medical doctor that will stand up and say homeopathy works for them. Or they've seen it work.
Yes.
Huh. And then you'll have to
cross-examine them.
I have another question about that, and that is homeopathy or homeopathy is viewed as a little guy thing. It's, you know, big pharma bad, homeopathy, you know, that's the company. They're all small, they do the work in their garage or whatever, and, you know, they're out there fighting the good fight. And so it's almost, although CFI isn't a David versus Goliath thing, you're gonna come off, you may be represented as this big mean lawyer taking on, you know, grandma and grandpa mixing up these things and just trying to help the world. So there's this common, I'm gonna say it's a misconception that homeopathy is this underrepresented, because it's actually not, right? It's big.
It's billions of dollars every year in the United States alone.
So you'll have to get that point across too, that you're not being a mean lawyer against mom and pop.
And something which people have come up to me claiming, and it's based on a misunderstanding of the suit. We are not saying stop selling homeopathic products. I wish CVS would. I honestly wish they would, because it is my firm belief that these products are ripping people off. But we are not saying it is illegal to sell these. What we are saying is change the way you display them, change the way you market them, change the way you put them online so that you are no longer confusing consumers about them. If somebody still wants their oscillococcinum, they're going to be able to walk into CVS stores and buy that product. I just want to see it put separate from the real medicine.
As a lawyer, I'm sure you know this, and as a person, even if you didn't know this, coming from CFI, I'm sure you know it now, but people are emotional and they make emotional decisions. So you can reason all you want, and at the end of it, people go, you know what, I'm going to check this box because I feel good about that. What do you say about that? If you understand my question there. Facts and figures, great, but you know what? I just don't feel right saying homeopathy shouldn't be next. You know,
we need to make very clear that this is about moving it somewhere else in the store, not about stopping people from getting it. Medicine has a very important concept, and that concept is informed consent. You know,
informed consent.
Informed consent. So if you decide to have an operation, it should be explained to you what your choices are, what the operation is, and you should say, yes, I want the operation, no, I don't. That's what we're asking for with homeopathy. If you're putting this product into your body, when you pick up that box, you should know what that box is. And if you choose to spend your money on a 200C dilution of duck liver because you think that will cure your flu, and you're a grown-up, I can't stop you doing that. I wish you didn't do it. I just want you to know what you are getting into when you're buying that, and then we can all be happy.
And you want it clearly stated, or you want it moved with a little sign? And let me ask a question about that, because this did work with cigarettes.
Yes.
They've gone through various labeling on cigarettes. I think one of the most odd things that had to be agreed to was, if this product is used the way it was intended, it will kill you.
Yes.
It's right on the product.
Absolutely.
And so do you want a disclaimer like that right there that says this product, I mean, besides moving it to another part of the store away from the real medicine?
We can't ask CVS to change how the product is labeled, because that's up to the FDA and that's up to the FTC. We have asked the FDA. We have asked the FDA to have the labeling in plain English. You know, rather than Annus Barberi, which nobody knows. I mean, my friends who are classic scholars wouldn't, I mean, they could translate it, but they would have no idea why they were translating it. I think that somebody should be able to pick up the packet of Oscillococcinum and see that it says duck, heart, and liver, rather than a Latin phrase.
Something, yeah.
We've also asked them to put the units in a globally accepted normalized format, rather than 200C, because unless you know the details of homeopathy, nobody knows what 200C means. So we'd like to see them put on the weight of the original ingredient, the active ingredient that is in these, like when you...
There is no weight.
Maybe that's why we would like to see them do that. When you go in and you buy your Tylenol, you have your, 20 milligram or 200 milligram.
Active ingredient.
Yeah. Let's do that the same way for homeopathic products. But we can't ask CVS to do that. That's not their responsibility. That's the manufacturer and that's the FDA.
Okay, so that's a different thing.
What CVS is responsible for is their product placement on this and their website on this. So and again, it's not up to us as the plaintiff to say this is the solution. That's up to a judge. We're saying stop them breaking the law, and how they carry on from there is their business. So one thing we suggested was have a separate aisle. Label the aisle homeopathic and alternative treatments. That's one suggestion we've had. Another suggestion we've made is that when you're online, and this is actually, actually very easy, I understand, for this to be done technically. But when you click on Oscillococcinum and to put it into your virtual basket, that a pop-up window comes up and saying, Oscillococcinum is a homeopathic product, and then a statement which the FTC has approved could then come up, which says that homeopathy does not have evidence supporting its efficacy, and it is based on 18th century theories out of Germany that are not accepted by the overwhelming majority of modern doctors. And you would then click, yes, I am aware of this, and you would go ahead and purchase it. But it would give you the chance not to buy it by mistake on it.
And this may be a bit of a tangent, but there are certain products that have been forced to say these statements have not been evaluated by the FDA.
Right. And again,
and people kind of ignore that.
People do kind of ignore that. That is the labeling on the product itself. And that's to do with the FDA on that, rather than the core of this dispute, which is with CVS.
Okay.
And I do want to say on this, by the way, that I'm actually a big fan of CVS. I think CVS has been very responsible. And I said this when I was talking to them, that you're the good guys in this. One of the reasons we chose CVS, apart from their universality across DC, is that they have made very responsible decisions in the past. They stopped selling tobacco and tobacco products, which for a lot of drugstores was one of the big profit centers.
Kind of odd. You go there to get your prescription drugs and something
and give me a packet of Marlboro, yeah. But they turned around and they said, we cannot in good conscience claim to be a part of your healthcare decisions and then have you buy cigarettes here. Congratulations, I shake a hand on that. So one of the reasons we selected CVS is, hey, you're making that same mistake, or at least a similar mistake, in other sections of your stores. Let's work together and see how we can avoid you doing that to your consumers. And in our discussions that we've had so far, the discussions have been friendly. I'm not saying we're 100% on the same page, and I'm very limited in what I can say about the discussions.
That's fine, I don't... Yeah.
But they're productive, and we both came to the agreement that the aim should be that if somebody doesn't want to buy this product, they shouldn't buy it by mistake. And if somebody wants to buy it and it's in the store, that's their choice.
And let's be clear about this by mistake, because if you walk down the aisle, you know, they are packaged in a cardboard square container. You can see a picture of the bottle. It's usually it could be an orangey type liquid, like the real medicine.
Absolutely.
So you might even pick it up by mistake, like I've picked up Polar Orange Dry instead of Diet Polar Orange Dry, because the only difference is the word diet.
Right.
And then get home, my wife says, you got to go back.
And that's when you were looking for...
I thought I had my hand on it.
A drink.
Yeah, right.
Imagine if it's your 2-year-old has an ear infection and you're just stopping by the store because you want something that's going to stop your kid screaming so you can all get to sleep at night. And you just walk in, you run in, you've got a crying toddler under one arm, and you're going down and you just grab this off the shelf. And that's where I hear it. I have, at this very conference, in the 36 hours I've been here, 3 people have come up and told me that they bought eye drops, homeopathic eye drops, by mistake.
Wow.
Because if you have pink eye, your eyesight's not particularly good at the time. And they got home and looked at it and realized they'd just spent their money on a bottle of water. They might just as well have opened the faucet on it.
I don't know this. Does CVS have its own brand of homeopathic?
CVS does have its own brand of
come on then. So because people will buy because I buy some of the CVS stuff because, you know, it's the same. In that, why buy $10 for aspirin when I can get it for $8?
In their defense on this, and this is very weird that I'm in their defense, they have a very limited range of these products. And it tends to be more at the high concentration rather than extreme dilution ends. Like there are some of the homeopathic products that aren't diluted at all on it.
It's still diluted.
Yes.
So why don't they just open up, you know, a Tylenol bottle and dilute that and sell it as their own homeopathic? And then, because if dilution, I mean, what's...
I completely agree with you.
Now we're getting into speculative crap here. So.
I think they have a greater degree of responsibility, obviously, when they're manufacturing their own products as well. I'm not saying they're not responsible when they're selling other people's products, because our entire lawsuit is based on that they are. But yeah, you're right. The ones that they manufacture themselves...
And they look very similar to the real medicine.
They absolutely. And that's what we're asking. We are simply asking, make it clear what people are buying and where it is, especially when you're dealing with people's health. People trust CVS. CVS wants people to trust them. That's their strategy, and that's a good strategy. So earn that trust.
Speaking of that, let me kind of sum up, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I want to go back to that quote. I'm going to read it.
Yep.
I'm going to read it verbatim.
And I'm going to be very embarrassed when I get it wrong.
No, I will tell you.
source.
I'm not going to ask. I will ask if you know. Just if you don't know, just say you don't know. Despite its widespread use in some countries, virtually no scientific authority takes homeopathy seriously. There are several reasons for this intense skepticism, but the most important focuses on a basic fact of chemistry. Simply put, there is nothing material left in a high-potency homeopathic product, end quote.
It sounds like it is from either the House of Commons report on homeopathy or the Australian National Report on Homeopathy.
This is a quote from the CVS website. If you go to cold remedies and the homeopathic product pops up and you've never heard of it, it says, there's a little box that says, what is homeopathy?
Yeah.
You press that box, it's a really long description, which was actually a really good
It's an
history
excellent
of it.
description, yeah.
This is the quote I pulled from it, though.
Yep.
So they're saying if you buy this product, well, how come they can't say, listen, we've got this information here. It's kind of long in the background.
They can, but...
They admit that it doesn't work, and they sell it as a remedy.
Right. And so and you're right, they can turn around and say, we already say this. But that's buried. That's not there. If that popped up on the website every time you tried to buy it, without having to click to it, that would be a different situation. Again, that description is one of the reasons I will say CVS is one of the good guys. You know, they are giving that information, but they're not giving that information at the place people need it.
Which is right there on the shelf.
If you go in and buy that in the store, if you buy a silicoccinum in the store, you will never see that description. If you buy it online and you don't click through to that, you will never see that description. It's not enough for them to have it on some web page buried away if no one's seeing it.
When I buy a prescription for myself or my wife and they click through it, they scan it, and then I have to sign something that says, do you wish to see the pharmacist? No, I don't wish to see the pharmacist.
And that's on a prescription drug.
Right. So they could easily make something that says, I acknowledge that this is not medicine and that I'm most likely wasting. I mean, I don't know how strong you want to word it, but it is doable.
It is.
Informed consent is doable.
Informed consent is absolutely doable, and that's what we're asking for.
Or you could say, oh, it's a homeopathic product, you must see the pharmacist, and the pharmacist comes and says, yeah, don't buy that.
Well, this is where I've gotten incredibly disturbed from friends of mine who've gone into and they've gone
tell me
in
the
CVS
pharmacist
and the
supports the
pharmacist
product?
has recommended a homeopathic product.
That is odd.
I mean, and I'm not blaming CVS on that because that's to do with the pharmacist and the pharmacist's code of ethics.
Well, or training.
I mean, absolutely. But, you know, these are professionals who are trained. And that, to me, it goes to what I was saying about people trust CVS and CVS wants people to trust them. And trust has to be earned in that case. Yeah, that's a very different situation. When the pharmacist is recommending something, that's a huge problem. And that would be dealt with legally in a very different way as well. It's a much, much more powerful
let's not go
argument.
there then.
Yeah.
All right, let's sum this up then.
Sure.
It's in D.C. only because that's where you have this, you can act as your own attorney general, is that what you said? What's the hope for outcome? That if this falls in D.C., that they'll just say, you know, it doesn't make sense to just make it a D.C. thing. We're going to put this nationwide or countrywide or, I'm sorry, nationwide, internationally. This is our new store policy.
The aim is that, like the overwhelming majority of lawsuits, this does not end up in a trial. You know, we would love to be able to sit down with CVS, discuss this, and any decision, if the court makes it, would only apply to D.C. When it's settlement discussions, on the other hand, our point is, let's make this a nationwide thing because you know what I'm going to do next is I'm going to look at what Virginia's consumer protection law is. I'm going to look at what California's Virginia protection law is. I'm going to look at what Texas is, Pennsylvania. You don't want to do this. If we end up having to go to court on this, and we win in D.C., the potential costs for CVS are huge. Because, and I didn't mention this, the law the DC Consumer Protection Law has a minimum penalty per offense of $1,500.
And they'll have to backtrack through their computer records?
I believe it's 7 years.
Okay.
And I believe that would be every sale of homeopathic products in D.C. for the last 7 years in CVS at $1,500 a crack.
And you know they have those records because they keep them, they need that for product placement, what's selling, what's not, what do we have to rotate.
Those records exist.
There's no denying that.
And that's why this is actually very high stakes for them on that side.
And now that you filed the suit, they cannot get rid of those.
Right, oh, certainly. So, you know, it would make no sense to me if we can come to an agreement. I believe that agreement would be nationwide. I can't speak for CVS on that, but the hope would be it would be nationwide.
Okay.
Because otherwise, I can retire.
You just keep going
doing this. And obviously, it's not just CVS. You know.
And you don't mean retire financially. You mean
no,
it'll be the last.
For the rest of my professional life, I could be filing suits in the 50 states, D.C., Puerto Rico. That's CVS. Then you've got Walgreens. Then you've got Rite Aid. Then you've got all the supermarkets.
Oh yeah.
This is, you know, there is not. Our aim is to send a message out there, and the message being that consumers deserve the information on this. And we can work together with you on this. If you're a retailer, we can work with you on this, and we should work with you on this because it helps you as well. If your customers are getting the information they need, they are better customers for you. I do not believe CVS wants to sell the things, wants to deceive people into buying homeopathy. That's not in their best interests. I do believe CVS wants to go on selling homeopathy if they're allowed to go on selling homeopathy, and at the moment it's a legal product. But what's not legal is to try and convince people that it's the same as what I'm going to call real medicine. Okay.
Nick Little, thank you very much. This was incredibly informative discussion, and I greatly appreciate it. Nick Little, Legal Department for Center for Inquiry on 502 Conversations. If you enjoyed this conversation, you can email me at 502conversations@gmail.com. If you did not enjoy this conversation, I'm sure you can find Nick Little on. You can tell me as well, but you know, if you'd like to see more conversations like this. And I will have a heavy disclaimer at the front and at the end of this, that the views expressed in this are yakety yak yak. You know how that goes.
Absolutely.
But great conversation. Thank you very much for being here.
Enjoyed it. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you. You're welcome.